Mike Knapp from Incrementa, and today I am talking to Mark Olsson, who's a virtual CIO who works with me with several of my clients. Now, I'm pretty excited about this. I gotta say, I'm geeking out more than a little bit because for almost 2 decades, I worked as a virtual CIO, being the bridge between business and strategy and then the nerdy execution side of IT. Mark has since taken over that cape for me. And I love talking about this stuff, and it's so valuable for businesses. So Mark, thank you so very much for joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, Mike.
Talking to business owners here who aren't necessarily technology people, but there's so much that they're missing out on in a lot of cases. Why should businesses be including technology at the leadership and the strategic planning level of their business?
So as businesses grow, incorporating technology into their strategic plan basically ensures that the infrastructure is there to support growth and business goals. And I'm not necessarily just talking about short-term planning. I'm talking about what's called an IT roadmap, so that you've got business direction, not just for a year, but out 4 or 5 years potentially. It also ensures that there's no overlap of efforts or functionality when you're doing IT projects across the company. It allows for proper budgeting year to year. And realistically, when a business isn't as concerned with the day-to-day operations and responding to IT emergencies, it also allows for creating market leadership through innovation, potentially extending internal technology or proprietary technology outside the business. You could find new ways to interact with your customers, marketing internal business knowledge. I mean, realistically, the sky's the limit.
When you actually start getting technology up at the leadership level, you can plan, which is great. And the other side, the side that I do when I'm doing the strategic planning side of things, is to try to find ways from the start where technology can speed up the strategy processes. So if you have such and such as a goal, it's not just how you can do it, but how technology can accelerate that process, which is huge. But there's a big problem with that. There's a gap, we'll say. I'd love for you to talk about the gap, because we've had this conversation way too many times.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a serious gap between the IT department and the business. They just think differently. They speak a different language. So combine that with kind of a potential lack of technical literacy among the rest of the business leadership. It just makes for unrealistic expectations. They're maybe not necessarily considering the bright new shiny piece of technology they want to install. And I mean, over time, if you're not right on top of your IT, the existing infrastructure maybe can't keep up with innovations you're trying to achieve, business goals that you're trying to reach, and outdated and proprietary systems, they can't keep up.
So I'm going to pause you, because you actually grabbed one of the core things that's always driven me nuts. IT often comes forward and they say, I need to do X, Y, Z. And what they're really saying is, I need you to buy the latest Firewall 5000 and implement it. So they're coming at it from one language and one thought process.
Yep.
And the business is saying, this is a goal that we want to accomplish, which creates a big gap.
Yep.
And so you're right, there's a language gap. There's a thinking gap, because one's thinking from a technical solution and the other one's thinking from a business problem. So you have such a big gap to fill.
Yeah, and one's basically thinking of tools and the other is thinking about business process.
Yeah, huge. Now, how do we bridge the gap? Because I'm guessing it's a different way of thinking.
Well, it's a different way of thinking. It's also finding somebody or a way of basically translating between those two levels. So an IT leader, like a CIO, is going to be able to give you that bridge. They're business person first. They probably got a technical background, which allows them to be an IT strategist as well. They've usually got a strong understanding of business processes and operations, but then using that technical background, they act as that translator, that facilitator between those two levels.
That is one of the things most companies don't have.
Exactly.
They either have an in-house IT person or an IT manager who's really somebody who's grown up in technology and now leads technology teams.
Yep.
They have an MSP or managed service provider, an IT company that does the technical tools work. But even those ones that offer a virtual CIO service rarely get to understand the business well enough to be able to come up from a business strategy standpoint. They're still focused on the delivery of IT services.
Absolutely. Day-to-day operations, that's what their bread and butter is.
So that leader you're talking about, while needs to have that technical knowledge, it sounds to me like they actually have to be very involved at the leadership level of the business to know the nuts and not the nuts and bolts, that's back to tools, but to know to be fully aligned, to know the strategy, know the overall roadmap for the business, and to be able to look at ways to improve the business that just happens to use the tool set that they have available.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, when it comes down to it, all of the change that we're talking about, the ability to use IT as an innovator and to push business goals forward, I mean, all of that comes from the executive. I mean, this kind of thing always happens top down, right? So making sure you've got somebody that's at the leadership level and can engage executive support is pretty much the most important part of getting this whole process started.
So I was going to ask you simply how to get started, but we're going to be a little more exact here.
Right.
For a mid-sized business, it's easy to get started with this because it's a matter of finding that right person who can tie in to that role at the leadership level and start getting things aligned. And there is talent out there to do that. There are experienced CIOs who are great.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking about one that I work with right now at a health foods company who has transformed the business using technology. He's amazing. But if you can't afford a $150,000 to $200,000 person, but you still want to make that leap, it's really hard. And that's where people like you who do that virtual CIO come in. So when you're working with a smaller company, say a 50-person company, where do you start with them?
Well, like I say, it really comes down to understanding the business. So kind of immersing yourself in the business itself, where they see themselves in the next 4 or 5 years, helping them start thinking about this IT roadmap and how the business's strategic objectives, their goals can match with particular technology projects that could help them get there in a decent amount of time. And then ultimately what you're trying to do is work with the resources they've got, whether that's their own internal IT or an MSP or whatever, to help them execute all of those projects and push them on their way and potentially set them up for the next 4 or 5 years.
Which is fantastic. So you end up with that long-term view. You get a more consistent execution, which is great. And you're focusing on the right things and instead of just buying the next piece of technology.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So now we get into the fun part. You know, I love stories. So I would love to hear a story of a company you've worked with and some of the impact that thinking this way with technology has made.
Actually, I just recently finished helping a small legal firm, and they had some kind of immediate business goals. They've got half a floor of paper copy they want to get rid of. Their records management process needed an overhaul, and they just wanted to find kind of a new and innovative way of working with all their records internally and with their clients. So we started a project and turned to document management software, practice management software, which is basically an entire platform, either cloud-based or hosted, that's dedicated to the use and governance around records management, right? So they basically discovered a few new ideas. They've got some new considerations around a client portal for sharing documents. They discovered that they can do email integration and store their conversations along with the actual matter. So yeah, I mean, they've found a way to get rid of all this paper copy. They're going to save some money on rent and space. They can make much better use of the space, obviously. They've found a whole bunch of new efficiencies in the way they're dealing with their documentation. They're able to access stuff much easier remotely, which of course is kind of important in today's climate. And it's just generally been a great project for them.
And that's awesome. So they've felt the impact incredibly quickly by the sound of it.
Mm-hmm. Just about immediately.
Yeah, those transformations can be huge. And I've done so many ERP implementations and whatnot over the years where we forgot about the tool and we went and implemented the changes and the business process first. And the value they get out of it is so big.
Mm-hmm. And it's always great to see that aha moment when they realize just exactly what it's going to be able to do for them.
I love that too. That's awesome. So Mark, thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.